My experience at the dentist was awful. We walked down Bruce Grove, and Mr. Caston's surgery was above a shop in the high road. We went in through a glass door on which his name was painted in large black letters. I wish it had been a solicitor's or undertaker's or anything but a dentist. That's what it felt like with those large black letters. The smell hit you at once. Gas. My legs started to wobble straight away, and my butterflies grew to such a proportion that my whole body started to waver. The floor was a grey, rubbery lino, and my every footstep seemed to stick like glue. Surely something will happen before I get to the top of the stairs, I thought. Something, anything, that will come between me and the large black dentist chair. Mr. Caston invited me to sit in the chair and pumped it up with his foot. Above was an enormous drill, good enough to build the M25 now, but then considered kind enough to use on children. I lay back, gave a thin smile, in the hopes that everything would disappear and I would wake up at home. But filling after filling went into my mouth, or sometimes a huge black rubber mask was put over my face and teeth were extracted. I always felt so sick afterwards. What a horrible experience. When it was over, we'd cross the road and go into Woolworths. This had a magical air about it. The floor was wooden and seemed to give with every step. At the back of the store was a long counter where we would sit on high stools and have tea in thick china cups with sticky currant buns. My mum would say, "Are you all right, love? Eat on the other side." I did, and was glad it was all over. While Mum was doing her shopping, I'd have a browse and remember going over to the magic tricks counter. There was a black cardboard tube with "A Night in Paris" stamped round the edge in gold. I looked around to see if anyone was looking and slipped the top off. I put it to my eye, hoping to see I don't know what, but there was nothing, just blackness. What a swizz, I thought, placed the top back on and went to find Mum. "What's that on your face?" she asked. "What is it?" I thought, and went to find a mirror. There were mirrors on every pillar in Woolworths. I don't know if you remember, but yeah, mirrors all round the shop. There, neatly surrounding my eye, was a thick black rim. I felt stupid and cross that I'd fallen for the trick. About this time, I was a bridesmaid for the first time. I never went to the hairdresser's to have my hair cut and had to hope Mum was feeling in a straight mood. If not, several attempts would be made to even it up, until sometimes my fringe was so short or at an angle. The photo in the local paper with Philip and the wedding photo matched, a crooked fringe in both. Talking of hair, I have a photo where I have curly hair. Mum gave me a home perm. Twinks. It was awful. Anyway, it was my cousin Pat's wedding. She was my mum's sister's daughter. Mum made the two bridesmaids' dresses, and I didn't like the fact that I couldn't choose what to wear. It was a fait accompli. I was very impressed with Sandra, my cousin. She looked pretty, and I wished I had a sticky-out dress like hers. I did love the thin blue velvet ribbon sewn onto the hem of my dress, though, and best of all I loved the lambskin cape that my grandpa had made for me. I wish I still had it now. It draped over my shoulders, covered my arms, and was beautifully warm in the cold winter's air. The collar was soft around my neck and had a smell of skins. This smell can transport me back to my childhood, and I love wearing fur, although it isn't green now, and I don't actually wear fur. I ran my small fingers in amongst the curls of the lamb's wool, which was creamy white. As I say, I found being a bridesmaid a bit disappointing. The day wasn't exciting or romantic enough for me, and I wished I'd looked more like Sandra. My time was coming, though. Back at school, I was now staying for lunch, which was scrummy. Across the hallway from our classroom was a small kitchen and homely dining room. We'd go in 6 at a time, and Mrs. Hall's daughter would cook us egg and chips, or sausage and chips, with baked beans if we wanted. Home cooked, with a cake afterwards, all washed down with a cup of tea or glass of orange juice. I stayed because by now we'd moved and it was too far for me to travel. My Auntie Evelyn and Uncle John came to live in our flat, and I'd trot across to her once a week to have lunch. This meant baked beans on toast or salmon and cucumber sandwiches with tinned peaches and evaporated milk for afters. Auntie Evelyn couldn't have any children, so she made a real fuss of me. She bought me a Bible, which sat in its own box, and on the glossy plastic cover was a picture of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Inside the Bible were lovely coloured pictures and a list of scriptures to read. I looked them all up, but I couldn't understand what they meant. One day I would, but for now I kept it in a special place and took it out of its box when I felt contemplative. Auntie Evelyn was not my real auntie, but Uncle John worked with my dad, and we knew them well. I was always very shy with them both, mainly because I couldn't understand them, but didn't like to say so for fear of hurting their feelings. Auntie Evelyn was broad Irish, and Uncle John broad Scotch, as Mum used to say. Walking back to school after one of Auntie's lovely lunches, late as usual, a man stopped me. "Hello," he said, "where are you off to?" I told him I was going into school, and he replied, "Oh, don't go this afternoon. Come with me and I'll buy you some sweets, and we'll go somewhere nice." I thought about it for a moment and decided I might get into trouble, so I said no thank you and went into my class, which had already started. Mrs. Hall asked me why I was late, and I told her I'd been talking to a man at the gate who wanted to buy me some sweets. She seemed concerned, which surprised me, and told us to get on with our work, and she disappeared for a little while. Looking back, I shudder at what could have happened if I'd said yes. Oh, one of those moments in life, eh? Good job I said no and went into school. It's now 1959. And back at school it was my turn to use the classroom on the ground floor, and it felt different, special. I'd been aiming for this all my school life. I started school aged 5 in 1954, and I'm realising as writing that 2 years in one class must have happened. Anyway, this was the top class of my junior school at last, and Mrs. Hall was my teacher. She was also the headmistress and lived at the house, which had the 4 classrooms. This classroom had a coal fire with a huge guard around it, on which was placed the crate of small milk bottles delivered every day to be drunk in break. I couldn't abide warm milk, and so I had a small bottle of fresh orange juice, which was very tangy and had a blue top. I've since found out I have an intolerance to the protein in milk, and so having the orange juice did me a big favour. Next to the fire was an organ with pedals on it, which Mrs. Hall accompanied us during our morning singing, very much in the style of Rock of Ages. I enjoyed my lessons, particularly the acting and shows we put on in the small playground. The only thing I hated was when we were asked questions as a class and asked to comment on something in front of the others. I hated being put on the spot and was afraid I'd get the answer wrong and be ridiculed. One day, Mrs. Hall asked us why we thought cats had rough tongues. I thought to myself, perhaps it's so they can clean themselves. However, I was too scared to venture an answer, and we were all chastised for not having a guess. She eventually told us, and I thought to myself, I knew that, but it was too late. I thought myself a coward. However, writing this, I think the rest of the class was too. After all, they didn't answer up. Maybe it was the way we were being taught. I've stopped blaming myself. Hooray! Only took 65 years to realise. I was 10 then, and I belonged to the London Club. 5 of us would get together on a Saturday and go up to London and see the sights. We'd come back and write up our experiences. We brought to class a Radio Times or other such magazine and would paste plain paper over each page. Then we'd write up our adventures, stick in the postcards we'd bought, and our own homemade scrapbooks were fashioned. We also did a project on the Queen's coronation, which had taken place a few years before, in 1953. I loved sticking the photos in and marvelled at her beautiful dress. Dad had bought me a green Osmoroid fountain pen with a small lever on the side to suck up the ink. I used this to write in my books, but was very upset when I lost it when walking home through the park. During break time, we'd play doctors and nurses or schools, and I remember doctors and nurses being a favourite. Owen, a boy in my class, bought me a bar of soap at Christmas, and I remember feeling truly amazed and puzzled that he'd bought it for me, that he'd thought of me. Why me? It puzzled me for years. It never crossed my mind to buy him anything, and I felt embarrassed, but secretly thrilled. One day a reporter from the local newspaper called and asked for a girl and boy to have their photograph taken for the local paper. I was chosen along with a boy called Philip Cohen. We went into the garden of the local almshouses, and standing under a cherry tree in full bloom, we were told to put our arms around each other. We did this, and the caption was, "In spring, a young man's fancy turns to ... When Mum bought the paper, I felt very proud to see myself with Philip, but didn't understand the headline. What did it mean? I did enjoy the experience of standing with Philip and loved his thick corduroy trousers. I still haven't changed my view. Corduroy, it's so manly. I love it. The exact photo of this hasn't been kept, but I do have a photo of Philip with the photographer's camera pretending to be taking a photo of me. Yes, recollections of that last term at junior school. It was going to be a big change coming up soon because we were going to move to another part, not of town, a different part. We lived in Tottenham, and it was probably a half an hour bus ride to get to Southgate, and that's where I was going to move whilst I was still in this class. So I was going to have to get on the bus, it was probably longer than half an hour. It was quite a way then. And then I was going to start a new school in this September. A different area, different school. So big changes coming up. Well, they do when you're 10, don't they? But this made it bigger because we moved house and we moved district. That's the word I'm looking for.